So what is this next test about? Well, some of the key stuff is, do you remember what this looks like? Like, there's a few graphs, you just better know what they look like. If that walked in the door, would you have known that it was a V shape? All right, I'm going to give you the 4 big ones. That's one of the, you just have to know that that's what that looks like. Like, why would you have to know that? Well, because if I tell you later that it got moved like this, you could say, oh, it moved 4 to the right. But what is it? You'd have to know it's a V shape that got moved 4 to the right. All right, so you got to know what they kind of look like. That's one of them. Here's another one, x squared. You should be like, oh yeah, that's the this shape. Take a quick second to sketch x squared. That's just a U shape. Then the other 2 biggies are the square root of x, and that's such awesome points as 0, 0, because if you put in a 0, you get 0. 1, 1, which weirdly is on every parent shape. 1, 1 is on every single parent function. And then it's 4, 2. I put over a little too far on that one. So 4, 2 would be like there. And 9, 3 is like there. And this graph looks kind of, I call it a ramp. To me, it looks like a jump. Like you're going to go off this thing with a bike and like jump off of something. Jump over the Grand Canyon, whatever. So there's your square root graph. And then the last biggie is x to the 3rd. I'm going to give you just a second. Try to remember that it looks kind of like the U shape on the right side. What's this one look like? It goes like this, it's just exactly like the x squared graph over there, but on this side it goes down. It's like a flipped over one on that side. That's the x to the 3rd graph. And this, I'm sorry, I said x to the 3rd, and then it had what looked like a 2 up there. X to the 3rd. Looks like that. Okay, those are the 4 parent graphs. That is the easiest thing. One of the easiest things about it is that if you forgot it, you could make an XY chart. Like, oh, I wonder what this looks like. I forgot it looks like this. And I'm like, I stick in a 0 and I get 0. So 0, 0 is on the graph. I stick in a 1 here, and then it's 1 to the 3rd, and y equals 1 to the 3rd is 1. 1, 1 is on the graph. Well, that doesn't help that much because that's on every graph. And then if I put in a 2, then I got 2 to the 3rd. 2 to the 3rd is 8. 2, 8. Oh, that went way up. And that's that point. And then if you put in, I said always put in a negative number, like -1. A -1 to the 3rd, when you put something to the 3rd, it's still negative, because it's negative times negative times negative. So that one would be -1, and there it is, -1, -1. And then -2 makes -8. And see how you can kind of make the shape, even if you go into the test having completely forgot what x to the 3rd is, just go snap off like 4 points. That means finding points. If I could only pick one thing for this whole test, it's can I give you an equation like this? This is a medium hard one. And could you find me 4 points? Now, question before everybody does that. Yes?
We obviously don't have to do negatives for finding the
For square roots, you are correct. And I even like the idea of making a chart, putting in a negative and going like, oh, -2. And then realizing, oh, square roots and negatives don't exist. This would be imaginary. Or you could just say, it doesn't exist. Okay, so it wouldn't be wrong to put in a negative. It's just be smart enough to know it doesn't work. Okay, so now, I said, if there was only one thing you had to do well for this test, it's this. Because I'm telling you, there's at least 4 problems on the test where if you can find points and then graph them, you're going to get it right. So let's practice this. Would you please find me? On the test, it'll be requiring 5 points. So, I double checked that. And the only reason I'm annoyed by the whole 5-point thing is I know that there's at least one problem on the test where you can't fit all the 5 points on the graph. So don't freak out if one of the points goes just off the graph. The team talked about it. on Friday when you guys didn't have school and we had to have school. So we made the call, and you don't always get what you want. I was hoping for a compromise there, but they wanted 5 points, even if it goes off the graph. All right, so a point. If you don't know what I mean by now, you're really behind. Just put in any number you want, then assess, did it work? Oh yeah, I can do that. 1 plus 2 is 3. Absolute value of 3 just means it's coming out positive. No matter what it was, it comes out positive. So y equals 3. 1, 3. All right, here's a few more good ones. 2 would give you a 4. 3 would give you a 5. And I said always put in a negative 1, because that way you'll get a point that's somewhere in this side of the graph. Negative 1 goes in, and I get negative 1, comes out positive 1, and then the absolute value keeps it positive, and y equals 1. So here's my points. 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, and negative 1, 1. It looks like it's a straight line. But the thing is, it's a V shape that's been shifted to the left. So do you get if I continued my graph, it would go like that? That's where a lot of kids are going to screw up. Because they're going to have graphed a straight line. Because they didn't even realize, oh, this is a U shape. I can't just graph 3 points that are in a straight line. Otherwise, look, if you graph this and you only graphed the points that you stuck in, you would have thought it was a straight line? That's why I was telling you, you better memorize that that's a V shape. That's not a straight line. In fact, none of the graphs that we graph are a straight line. If all you got was a straight line, you better make some more points. Because your straight line is eventually going to turn the corner and then start going up like that. And you have to graph it as what shape it is, even if it takes you a few more points. Maybe you had 5 points and they were all in a straight line. You're still going to get it marked wrong if you don't make the right shape. So make a few more points until it turns into a V. Because the only one that has a truly straight line is this one. And it's just, you got to make a few more points until you see the V. Yes? When you put in a point that doesn't what?
That doesn't like touch the V shape.
So there's nothing wrong with these points. These were all good points. But do you get if I only graph those, I'll have a straight line? And I know from what this looks like that there must be a V. So I would have to keep on making points until I got the V shape going. Because as soon as it makes, you'd have had to probably put in 2 more points to go, oh, there's my V. And then okay, you don't have to graph like an equal number of points here. Eventually you'd end up with like 10 points. You don't need that. But you need it to not be a straight line. This is a V shape. So graph enough points so you can see the V. All right. I said I'd start with easy. Then I moved to medium. Here's the hardest kind. And they just have a 2 in the front. That's a stretch. And then they might even have a negative in front of that, which is a reflect. And then they might have a -5, and that's a right 5. And the trickiest part here is, again, making points. I said there'd be at least 4 times in this test where you'd have to find points. This is the hardest kind. Some kids just think, well, just always put in 0. That'll always work. Nope. Do you get when you put a 0 in here, you get the square root of -5, which doesn't even exist? So 0 was not a good call. You always want to try to make the numbers work nice. It was okay to try 0, but it's not going to work. And I'm smart enough to know that 1 isn't going to work either. 5 would be a great place to start. If you the first thing you do is make the inside of this thing get small, like with a 5 or maybe a 6, that was a good place to start. Okay, now find me. Let's not do 5, it just takes too long. Find me 3 points. If 5 worked, something near 5 is also going to work. If you don't understand this kind, I do understand. It's hard. Because because you got to do like 5 little math problems. You got to go 5 minus 5, and then the square root of 0, and then you got to times that by 2, and then make it negative. Just to make sure you got the first one. Did you get 0 for the first one? Good, then you're doing it right. So 5 was a good call. Try something else, like 6. Try 4. Just see what happens, and then you'll realize, oh, no, 4 doesn't work. Six comes out to -2. Do you agree? Awesome. In case you got lost on that one, it'd be 6 minus 5 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. And then 1 times -2 is -2. All right. 7 doesn't work real nice. Why? Well, you put the 7 in, and then you got 7 minus 5, which is 2, and then the square root of 2. 0 of you know the exact answer for that. Square root of 2 is weird. It's some weird decimal. Something times something has to equal 2. And it's like 1.6 or something. And so if that happens, just don't use it. Just like, oh, well, swing and a miss. 7 didn't work. How about 8? Does that work nice? No, how about 9? Yes. Put in a 9, and then I got 9 minus 5 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 times -2 is -4. Is that enough points for now? It is. On a test, you'd have to find a couple more. And here's my graph. 5, 0, over 5, up 0. 6, -2. 9, -4. Almost looks like it's flipped upside down. And it is, because of that. Do you remember that deal? The parent graph would have been here. This one's been moved to the right 5 and flipped upside down. And stretched, which is really hard to see. Stretches are hard to see on the graph, but... All right, that might be beyond some of you, because it's one of the kind where you get 5% added to your score. You know, if you get the easy ones right, you got a C. Hopefully you can pull this one off and pull yourself up to like a C+, and then get another one like it right and move up to a B-. All right, here's one that I think is kind of medium. Can you tell me the 3 things that have to happen to this shape, and then we have to talk about what order they should go in? Now, I know you'll probably know the 3 things. I am going to say that there's an easy way and a hard way to do these. And the easy way to do them is to do everything that's on the outside of the function. You know the vertical stuff? Do all the vertical stuff first, because that will follow the order of operations. Do all your vertical stuff first, because the stuff on the outside you can trust. Remember that deal? You trust the stuff on the outside, you don't trust what's inside. So if you start on the outside, then we're just going to start with this. And that is the first thing that I see on the outside, and it's going to be a vertical reflect. How many of you had that? Awesome. Then this 4 here is called a vertical stretch. BFO by a factor of, you can write it out, or you can just say BFO 4. You with me so far? If you've done all the stuff on the outside, then go in the inside and finish in there. The last thing is that. Seems like it's 8 to the right. It's actually left 8. Raise your hand if you caught that it was left 8. Okay, awesome. Good. That wasn't that bad. Now, a ton of you are going to get the order wrong on this next one that I do, so pay attention. What I said was start on the outside and do all the outside stuff first. And the last thing you do is the inside, because the order will matter. You have a question still?
What
BFO stands for by a factor of. Do you get if you just said vertical stretch, you didn't tell me how much to stretch it? So that's why I say by a factor of 4, or you can write it out. You know that the stretch is a stretch of 4. It's 4 times as big. All right. So remember, I said a lot of people are going to mess this one up, and you're going to be like, it's just like the last one. It's not exactly like the last one. I think a lot of people will mess up the order. There's 4 things, and I said start on the outside and finish with the inside. Get all the outside stuff first, and then the last thing you do is the stuff on the inside. Well, this is very similar to last time. It is, but what's going to get people is the order. Kieran, I said to start on the outside, so what do you think I would want to do first?
Vertical.
Yep. Vertical what? Starts with an R. Reflect. All right, it's easy to forget. Lance, can you tell me the other vertical thing that's right next to it?
Oh, what do you mean?
No, right here. The 4. What's that? It's a vertical thing. Okay, it's a vertical stretch. BFO 4. That is identical to last time so far. Who thinks I know what I'm talking about by finish all the stuff on the outside? Daniel, what do you think's next then?
The down 8.
Down 8. You are correct. Some of you are like, but I just went to the left too. Nope. You're wrong. You have to finish with the inside stuff is going to be last. I said it like 3 times. Maybe you didn't understand what I meant. That's last. And if that's last, the last thing I should write is left 2. There it is in order. Now, who had them all right, but not necessarily the order? Like you had them all right for sure. All right, who had it right and the right order? All right, good. That's what's going to get you on the test. All the outside stuff was first. So that had to be before that. That's last. Now there's another way to do these, but I don't want to confuse you. So if your friend has another way that ends up working, cool, good for them. I want to give you just one way so you don't get confused. Do all the outside stuff first. Yes? What if what? BFO stands for by a factor of. So basically, do you get if I just said stretch, I didn't say how much to stretch? And the 4 is telling you how much to stretch. If you forget the 3 letters, at least say vertical stretch 4, and I can probably take it. Okay? Yes?
On the test, will there be like a horizontal reflect?
There can be. All that is the negatives on the inside. Here, let's just do one like that. Because we should practice this one more time because we did not get everybody the last time. I've had 4 like 5 times. Okay, so let's do a 1/2 in the front. And then it's an absolute value. And there's a negative on the inside. And then there's a -8 out here. In the right order. The last thing you do is the inside. Bennett, what do you think that 1/2 is supposed to be? And be careful because it's not a stretch. Most kids are going to say it's a stretch, but it's not. There's 2 ways to say. Just say it like in the real world, if I do the opposite of stretching something, can you think of like anything you could shrink? There you go. That's it. It's what kind of a shrink though? Vertical. How would you know that? Because it's on the outside. Anything on the outside is vertical. That's a vertical shrink. And then if I don't say the 1/2, I can minimum, if you say vertical shrink half, I can give it to you. But if you're good enough at memorizing to memorize BFO, that's the way you should do it in pre-calc too. I can probably let you forget the BFO on this test, but by a factor of, BFO works in pre-calc for sure. And if you don't have that, I can't promise you a pre-calc teacher wouldn't mark it wrong. So try to say BFO. Yes?
If it's outside and it's positive, then is it shrink?
Outside is vertical always. The reason it's shrink versus stretch is if this number is less than 1, do you agree that you multiply by a decimal like that, it gets smaller? That's why it's a shrink. It's not whether it's negative or not. The negative is only telling you if it's reflected or not. So if I gave you two that were side by side and I had one of them was like a 4 and one of them was like a 1/4, remember, we can try to trust the outside. Doesn't this seem like it's 4 times bigger? And that's like stretching. And this one is a shrink. Okay, so this one, the top one's a stretch. The bottom one, that one is a shrink because it's gonna make it smaller when you multiply by 1/4. Okay. All right, good. So this one started with a vertical shrink by a factor of 1/2. And then I finished the outside, which is down 8. And then that thing, ooh, that's not left or right because there's no number. It's not left or right. It is not a vertical, it's a horizontal reflect. And I am okay with you just saying H because I'll know what you mean. A V is a vertical, or an H is a horizontal. So that's a horizontal reflect. Now, I consider this a medium skill. Now that I've taught it to you, I hope it's an easy skill. I hope these aren't that bad, I don't think. But I could see a kid forgetting, like, the word for shrink, you know? So, take notes. Look over your notes right before the test. This one is a great example because it's like one of the harder ones for people because the order might get messed up because people forget they got to end with this last thing has to be last, or the inside one has to be last. And it's also good because it's got a fraction and there probably will be one on the test. So this is a great one for taking notes. All right. So what else do you have to know for this test? It's mostly the stuff we've just covered, okay? And the thing I'm the most concerned about is that last thing, like a complicated one like this. Let's make it a negative x plus 4. And kids getting confused on exactly what the points are. So let's just end with one of those. I think this is the hardest thing. Can you find me 3 points? Can't say I didn't make you practice this a lot. I'll pause while you try 3 points on this. Hint, this negative is already there. You're putting something in a parenthesis on the x. That negative is already there and it's going to stay there. So when you put in a number like 2, you just put it there. If you put in negative 2, then you'd put in a negative 2 in there. So everybody put in negative 2 as one of your answers. I'm going to pause for a second. So if you want to know if you got this last one right, if you stuck in a negative 2, you'd have 2 negatives in there, which makes this positive 2. Absolute value is keep it positive 2. Times 3 is 6. Plus 4, you should have got 10. Did anybody have negative 2, 10? All right, then you're doing these right. Now you got plenty to practice. On that worksheet I just handed out, that is the heavy graphing part. Then I'm gonna open up the review worksheet, which is the rest of the stuff, which is more like what order you do it in, all that stuff. You confused by the negative 210?
Yes.
Okay, so do you get that no matter what it comes out on the inside, the absolute values would make it positive 2? Okay, so then you take 2 times the 3. And that's 6 plus 4. There you go. Maybe you just forgot to add the 4th in. All right. Okay, so if you want to know what's on the test, well, graphing problems like this are the hardest part. So what you're working on, the worksheet, that's the hardest part. The rest of it, I'm going to open up right now. And I think those warm-up problems were a little too easy. So I actually have decided not even show kids next hour those warm-up problems. Instead, I'm publishing the full practice test, of which that printed page is the graphing part. Still running. All right, that's all I have for the review video for today. There should be another review tomorrow. Save and close.